Before Africa was carved by foreign hands, it was already alive, thriving in rhythm, wisdom, and civilization. Empires soared. The gold-laden Mali Empire, home to Mansa Musa, one of the richest men in history. The scholarly center of Timbuktu, where libraries held the thoughts of centuries. The towering stone walls of Great Zimbabwe, testaments to African architecture. Trade routes laced the land, camel caravans crossed the Sahara, dhows sailed the Indian Ocean. From Benin's bronzes to Aksum's obelisks, from Nubia's pyramids to Congo's courts, Africa stood tall, sovereign, and complex. There were laws, philosophies, universities, and economies long before Europe's boots touched African soil. Africa was not waiting to be discovered. Africa was not a void. Africa was a world. But in the shadows of Europe's industrial hunger, new eyes gazed upon the continent, not with wonder but with appetite. The Berlin Conference, 1884 to 1885. In a cold room in Berlin, far from the sunlit soils of Africa, Europe's most powerful men gathered on. November 1884. The Berlin Conference. 14 nations, Germany, Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium, and more. Even the United States had a seat. But Africa? Africa had no voice, no seat, no elders, no kings, just maps and knives. Led by Otto von Bismarck, the conference claimed to bring order to colonization. What it did was greenlight the partition of a continent. The doctrine of effective occupation was introduced. A European power could claim any African territory if it could demonstrate control. This ignited a frantic race, the scramble for Africa, a frenzy of flags and rifles. Lines were drawn with rulers, not reason. Kingdoms were split, ethnic groups severed. Enemies forced into one colony, allies torn apart. Britain claimed East and Southern Africa. France took West Africa. Portugal held on to parts of the South. And Belgium? Under King Leopold II, it took the very heart, the Congo. But not for Belgium. Leopold took it for himself. He called it the Congo Free State. But it was neither free nor a state. It was a private rubber empire ruled by terror. Leopold's private army, the force publique, enforced rubber quotas with mutilation and murder. Men's hands were chopped off. Women were held hostage. Villages burned if production fell short. Children orphaned. Bodies piled in silence. Between 1885 and 1908, over 10 million Congolese perished. It was genocide. A Holocaust hidden behind a European king's smile. And while the blood flowed in the Congo, the world looked away. The West called it progress. But it was greed soaked in blood. But Africa did not kneel. From the coasts to the deserts, from forests to the mountains, resistance flared. Ethiopia stood firm. Emperor Menelik II read every word of the treaties. He modernized his army, forged alliances, and prepared. In 1896, at the Battle of Adwa, Ethiopia defeated Italy, a victory that shook the European illusion of superiority. In West Africa, Samori Touré built an empire of trade and tactics. He fought France for 16 years. His armies moved like shadows, retreating, striking, vanishing, masters of guerrilla resistance. In southern Africa, Shaka Zulu had already transformed warfare decades earlier, turning tribal conflict into organized militarism. His legacy inspired generations of Zulu resistance. In Ghana, when the British demanded the sacred golden stool of the Ashanti, it was Yaa Asantewaa, a queen mother, who rose. "If the men will not fight," she said, "then we the women will." And she led a fierce rebellion in 1900, defending her people's honor and soul. In Algeria, Abdelkader fought the French for decades, not just with guns but with diplomacy, Islamic scholarship, and unmatched valor. In Angola, Queen Nzinga outwitted the Portuguese, even refusing to kneel at negotiations, placing a servant's back as her throne. This was not silence. This was fire. When guns failed, Europe wielded a quieter weapon: divide and rule. They split tribes, favored some, oppressed others. They invented ethnic identities, amplified minor differences, and sowed hatred. In Nigeria, the British ruled indirectly, supporting loyal chiefs, punishing dissenters and redefining communities by usefulness to empire. In Rwanda, the Belgians issued ethnic ID cards, officially separating Hutu from Tutsi, a division that would one day spiral into genocide. Colonial governments erased names, banned traditions, and renamed rivers and cities. African children were taught to admire foreign kings, celebrate European heroes, and worship gods who looked nothing like them. Their own names became punishable. Their own gods became demons. This wasn't development. It was erasure, a slow, invisible theft of identity. They claimed they came to develop Africa, but they came to extract rubber in the Congo, diamonds and gold in South Africa, cocoa in Ghana, palm oil in Nigeria, copper in Zambia, ivory, timber, groundnuts, uranium, cotton, coltan. Colonial railways were not built for Africans. They ran from mine to port, not village to village. Africans paid taxes in colonial currency, money they could only earn by working for colonizers. It was economic enslavement. Colonial governments owned the land. European companies owned the banks. African laborers toiled in their own lands, but had no ownership, no rights, no dignity. And after independence, new chains appeared. Debt, corrupt trade deals, foreign-owned corporations, mining contracts signed in silence. They stopped calling it colonialism, but it never ended. The legacy. The scramble for Africa officially ended by the early 20th century, but its blueprint still shapes the present. Borders, drawn by foreign hands, still divide families, tribes, and nations. Languages, French, English, Portuguese, often dominate over African tongues. Education systems still prioritize Shakespeare over Shaka, Napoleon over Nkrumah. Legal systems speak in foreign laws. Economic models still extract raw materials without building local industries. We mine gold, yet own none of the banks. We export coffee, yet import finished drinks. We send lithium and cobalt abroad, then buy back expensive batteries. We remain tenants in our own house. And yet, the world blames Africa for wounds it never inflicted, for chaos it never chose. But we remember, Africa was never silent. Africa was silenced. But now, Africa speaks. African scholars are rewriting the textbooks. Filmmakers are restoring erased stories. Writers, poets, artists, musicians are reclaiming lost symbols, celebrating ancestors, and questioning imposed truths. The youth are questioning borders, renaming streets, demanding stolen artifacts, and shaping their own destiny. This is not nostalgia. This is reclamation. Because when we control the story, we control the future. Closing message. The scramble for Africa was not just a partition. It was a betrayal, a theft, a violent rewriting of a continent's destiny. But Africa did not die. Africa resisted. Africa remembers. And now, Africa rises. We are the descendants of kingdoms, philosophers, warriors, and wisdom keepers. The fire of Yaa Asantewaa, the vision of Samori Touré, the courage of Menelik II, the strategy of Shaka, the strength of Nzinga flows through us. They took our land. They took our names. But they could not take our spirit. Now we rise. We remember. And we reclaim what was always ours. The story. The voice. The future.